Close your eyes and let the world around you fade away. Tonight we travel back in time to a small medieval village where life was shaped by faith, toil, and the changing seasons. Here, a girl is born into a world of straw and timber cottages, smoky hearths, and church bells echoing through the fields. We will follow her from infancy, through childhood, marriage, and motherhood, through joy, hardship, and the quiet strength that carried her life. Listen closely to the sounds of the village, the crackling fire, the whisper of wind through trees, the laughter and tears of generations past. And let her story unfold, slowly, gently, like the turning of a page in a long-forgotten book. She entered the world in a cottage of wattle and daub, walls patched with mud, roof thatched with straw. Smoke hung thick from the hearth, stinging her mother's eyes as she laboured. The midwife, bent with age, murmured prayers to the Virgin and pressed herbs to ease the pain. Every birth was a gamble. Many mothers and babies were lost to fever, bleeding, or weakness. The girl's first cries were greeted with relief, though her future was uncertain. She was swaddled in coarse cloth and laid near the fire, her tiny life already bound to the rhythms of peasant survival. Faith, toil, and the mercy of saints, infant mortality loomed like a shadow. Many children did not see their second year, claimed by coughs, fevers, or malnourishment. Her parents prayed to Saint Nicholas, protector of children, hoping she would be spared. She drank warm goat's milk when her mother's supply failed, and was soothed with lullabies in a tongue older than Latin. Her cradle was a carved wooden box, padded with wool. Rats scurried in corners, fleas bit at her skin, but her parents fought to keep her alive. Survival itself was her first triumph, a fragile spark in a world where death lingered at every doorstep. By 4, she carried tasks suited to small hands, scattering grain for chickens, collecting kindling from the woods, and stirring pots of pottage. Play came in moments, skipping stones, weaving flowers, or chasing geese. Yet even games prepared her for adult life, teaching rhythm, balance, and patience. The household worked as one. Idleness was frowned upon, for each member's labour kept hunger at bay. Though she sometimes laughed with friends, illness could snatch companions away overnight. Each tolling church bell reminded her family that life was brief, and childhood was not a time of leisure, but of learning and duty. The church shaped her earliest understanding of the world. Priests thundered from the pulpit, warning of sin, hell, and salvation. She crossed herself at shrines, kissed relics on feast days, and prayed for protection from storms, wolves, and sickness. Latin words filled the air, mystical, incomprehensible, yet powerful. The saints became her guides, Bridget for women, Roch against plague, Michael as defender. Faith mingled with the fear, binding her to obedience. The church also marked the calendar. Lent, Advent, feast days, and fasts. Even as a child, she knew her soul's fate depended on humility, penance, and obedience to both God and Lord. Her days were measured not by clocks, but by sun and season. Spring brought lambing and planting, summer demanded endless weeding, autumn gave harvest festivals, and winter forced endurance. In cold months, smoke filled the cottage as the hearth burned day and night, blackening beams overhead. Vermin crept into food stores, making hunger a constant threat. Yet festivals brought joy, bonfires, dancing, bread blessed at Mass, and songs sung late into the night. She learned early, that joy was fleeting, hardship constant, and only through community could survival be won. These lessons shaped her girlhood more firmly than any book or teacher. By 10, her hands were calloused from spinning wool, grinding grain, and scrubbing wooden bowls. She fetched water daily, her shoulders aching beneath the yoke. She learned healing from her grandmother, memorizing herbs to soothe fevers or dress wounds. Yet knowledge was dangerous. Women with too much skill risked suspicion of witchcraft. Her clothing was coarse linen, often patched, while noble children paraded in silks during festivals. Still, she laughed with friends in the fields, shared secrets during berry picking, and listened to tales by firelight. Her world was narrow, but within its borders she found both burdens and simple joys. At 12, changes in her body marked her as ready for marriage. Childhood's games faded into lessons of duty, managing a household, brewing ale, and weaving cloth. Her parents spoke with neighbours, bargaining over dowries of hens or strips of land. For her, marriage was not romance, but survival, a contract between families. The priest's sermons reminded her that women must obey, bear children, and keep the household in order. She felt fear, but also curiosity, hoping her husband might be kind. Girlhood ended quickly. Womanhood began with expectation, and her fate was no longer her own to decide. Her wedding was humble, a simple veil, prayers at the altar, and bread shared with neighbours. Soon after, she moved into her husband's cottage, where new duties awaited. She rose before dawn, milking cows, kneading bread, and mending clothes by firelight. In fields she bent beside him, sowing seed and gathering sheaves. At night she spun wool while her husband drank ale with the neighbours. The church blessed their union, yet also reinforced her obedience. Her worth was measured in labour and fertility. Though life was heavy with responsibility, she sometimes found comfort in laughter, song, and the quiet warmth of partnership. Pregnancy came swiftly, as expected. Childbearing was both duty and danger. She bore children in pain, guided by midwives with herbs and whispered prayers. Some infants survived, others died within days, wrapped in small shrouds and buried in churchyards. Each loss left scars unspoken. Her body weakened with each birth, yet she endured, for children were a family's greatest wealth. She nursed infants, rocked cradles, and comforted the sick, all while tending the hearth. In laughter of her little ones, she found hope, but always beneath hung the shadow of illness, hunger, and the unrelenting demands of survival. Her life followed a rhythm as steady as the church bells. Dawn meant work in fields, noon meant bread and ale, evening meant spinning and mending by firelight. Meals were simple: coarse bread, pottage of beans, ale safer than water. Meat was rare, reserved for feast days or hunts. Clothes were patched endlessly, shoes mended until leather wore through. Winters were hardest, when food ran thin and smoke stung eyes in the darkened cottage. Yet community offered relief, neighbours sharing tools, women singing as they spun, men gathering for ale. Hardship bound them together, weaving resilience from scarcity and faith. Conflict often spilled into her quiet life. She heard of battles between kings, crusades called by popes, and lords clashing over land. Soldiers sometimes marched through villages, seizing grain or demanding shelter. She feared their armour and swords, for peasants had little defence. Taxes rose to fund wars far away, and her husband grumbled at the bailiff's demands. Knights, though admired in stories, appeared as figures of power, not protectors. She prayed for peace, yet war was a constant shadow, shaping her world even when battlefields lay miles beyond. lives of peasants were always tied to the ambitions of lords. The greatest terror was pestilence. Rumors of plague spread faster than the sickness itself. When it reached the village, fear silenced laughter. Families barred doors, hung herbs above thresholds, and prayed desperately to saints. She nursed the sick, though each cough filled her with dread. Bells tolled daily for the dead, graves dug hastily in fields. Some blamed sin, others the stars, still others foreigners. She lost neighbours, perhaps even kin, yet life demanded she continue. Fields had to be tended, children fed. Survival in such times was both miracle and curse, leaving scars on the soul that never healed. Not only plague, but hunger haunted her. Poor harvests followed harsh winters or storms, leaving granaries empty. She learned to stretch thin pottage, mixing beans, herbs, and scraps of barley. Bread grew coarse, sometimes baked with ground acorns to fill bellies. Children cried from hunger, their ribs sharp beneath skin. She prayed for rain when fields dried, and for sun when rains drowned crops. Hunger tested bonds. Neighbours shared when able, but desperation bred theft and quarrels. Famine was a slow, grinding terror, yet she endured, clinging to faith and the promise that spring would bring renewal once more. Despite hardship, joy found its way into her days. Festivals marked the calendar: May Day with dancing around poles, harvest feasts with music and ale, Yuletide fires burning against winter's cold. She sang as she spun, laughed with neighbours, and told stories by candlelight. Children played barefoot in fields, chasing geese or splashing in streams. Weddings brought colour, with garlands and laughter echoing late into the night. For brief moments, hunger and illness were forgotten, replaced by community and song. These were the memories she cherished, the light that softened the relentless toil and suffering of her peasant life. Her role remained constant: spinning wool, weaving cloth, brewing ale, baking bread, tending gardens, nursing children. She taught daughters to spin and sons to sew, passing down knowledge inherited from generations. Work was endless, yet women's labour was often unseen, overshadowed by men's toil in fields or wars. Still, she knew the household could not survive without her hands. She carried wisdom of herbs, charms, and customs, though always careful not to draw suspicion. Women were expected to be silent, obedient, humble, yet within their circles they held strength, keeping families alive through skill, patience, and endurance. She lived beneath layers of power. At the top stood kings and nobles, armoured knights enforcing their will. Beneath them, clergy wielded spiritual authority, reminding peasants of heaven and hell. Her family, bound as serfs, owed labour and rent to their lord. Freedom was not hers to claim. Taxes pressed hard, yet resistance meant punishment. Still she saw moments of rebellion, peasants refusing unfair levies, women gossiping about lords' cruelty. She accepted her place outwardly, yet inside she longed for more. Social order was heavy as stone, but community gave strength. Together, peasants endured, bound by shared burdens and whispered hopes. By her 30s, if she lived so long, she had seen many losses. Siblings, neighbours, perhaps even children buried in the churchyard. Her face bore lines from sun and sorrow, her hands stiff from endless labour. Yet she also carried pride, children grown strong, fields surviving harsh winters, knowledge preserved in her memory. She had become a source of guidance, teaching younger women the rhythms of hearth and field. She no longer feared priests' warnings as much. Life itself had been penance enough. With each passing year, she valued the fleeting joys: warm bread, laughter, and the sound of church bells at dawn. Old age was rare, a prize won through resilience. Her hair turned silver, her back bent, yet she still shuffled through the village with stick in hand. Younger women came to her for advice. Which herbs eased childbirth? Which chants softened grief? She became a living archive of memory, carrying stories of famine, plague, and festivals long past. Children listened wide-eyed as she told tales by the hearth. Though frail, she was respected, her endurance proof of strength. Her body weakened, but her spirit carried the weight of generations, binding past and present with quiet dignity. When her final illness came, it was met with resignation, not surprise. She lay on straw, wrapped in blankets, as family whispered prayers beside her. The priest arrived, carrying holy oil, anointing her forehead while murmuring last rites. Candlelight flickered on rough wooden beams as she thought of her life, of childhood games, marriages, births, deaths, and seasons endured. She had lived not in luxury, but in resilience, a life defined by duty, yet marked with moments of joy. She surrendered to God, trusting the promise of heaven. Around her, silence deepened as her family prepared to say farewell. Her body was carried to the churchyard, wrapped in a shroud. Bells tolled slowly as villagers gathered, murmuring prayers for her soul. Earth covered her grave, simple and unmarked save for memory. Yet her legacy lived on in her children's laughter, in recipes of bread and ale, in songs she had sung at the spinning wheel. Her life was not recorded in chronicles, yet it echoed in fields sown, garments mended, and wisdom passed down. She was one of countless women whose strength sustained the medieval world, unseen by history's scribes, yet essential. In the silence of the earth, her story endured.